Or is the system turned on its head? And these guys are not working one job. They're not working two jobs. I think if you go look up certain personality disorders, you might see some of those things appear. I also
Ever feel like you can't say what's on your mind without someone jumping down your throat? Dr. Phil's had enough of that BS. He's taking on the woke mob and he's not pulling any punches. In this video, we're gonna see Dr. Phil go toe-to-toe with activists who think they can shut down anyone who doesn't agree with them. He's asking the questions nobody else dares to, and trust me, you won't believe some of the responses he gets. So picture this. Dr. Phil's sitting across from some parents on his show, and the topic? Gender pronouns in schools. Yeah, it's about to get real spicy.
You began to schedule time to get a double mastectomy.
I haven't had any top surgeries, but I did get approved for it.
Do I get better when they do the exorcisms? Well, because you're supposed to, and you believe that, and
These parents are freaking out about teaching 5-year-olds about gender identity. Dr. Phil's just listening, but you can see he's ready to jump in. He's got that look in his eye, you know? Then boom, Dr. Phil hits him with the big question. Why are we teaching pronouns before basic biology? The crowd goes wild. It's like he just said what everyone was thinking, but was too scared to say out loud. Some teacher tries to school Dr. Phil with science, but our boy Phil's not having it. He calls it out for what it is, just making stuff up to fit an agenda. Then some activist jumps in, calling Dr. Phil hateful for mentioning biological facts. Oh boy, here we go. But Dr. Phil doesn't back down. He fires back. Are we erasing women by being trans inclusive? The room's buzzing, half the audience is nodding, half looks like they're about to lose their minds. It's chaos, but Dr. Phil's cool as a cucumber. You gotta hand it to him. Dr. Phil's not trying to win a popularity contest. He's there to speak his mind, even if it pisses people off.
3 sons.
Who all
You
have
have
had
one
issues with
mother.
you.
You
All have
can't
had
speak
issues
for
with you.
them.
I would
You
rather
got
be
one
motherless
mother.
10 times.
why are you in a homeless shelter?
I was in a homeless shelter because I got kicked out in 6 inches of snow.
And let me tell you, it's pissing off a lot of people, but that's what makes it so great to watch. He's saying what a lot of us are thinking but are too scared to say out loud. Dr. Phil keeps pushing. He asks the parents, do you think your 5-year-old is ready to decide their gender identity? One mom looks like she's about to cry. She says her kid came home asking if he could be a girl now because his teacher said he could choose. Dr. Phil just shakes his head. You can tell he thinks this whole thing is nuts. But here's where it gets really interesting. Dr. Phil turns to the camera and says, we're confusing our kids. They need to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic before we start messing with their heads about gender. The studio audience erupts. Some people are cheering, others are booing. It's like a boxing match, but with words. Dr. Phil's not done though. He looks right at the activist and says, you can't change biology with ideology. Ouch, that's gotta sting. But the activist fires back, calling Dr. Phil a transphobe and saying he's on the wrong side of history. Dr. Phil just laughs it off. He's heard it all before. While the activist's words bounce off Dr. Phil like water off a duck's back. He's got bigger fish to fry. There's a silent epidemic sweeping the nation, and it's not what you think. It's the fear of speaking up.
If that's your symbol system and that's what works in the short term, that's fine. But then you are left with what we are left with, which are the same symptoms. Questions? Did they do any psychological testing? Did they ask you why? What was your motive?
It was completely self-defense.
Dr. Phil's about to drop a bomb on his audience, and it's gonna make some heads spin. He says, listen up, folks. Did you know that 62% of Americans are scared to speak their minds? The crowd goes quiet. You can hear a pin drop. He continues. That's right, over half the country's walking on eggshells. One wrong word, and bam, you're toast. This isn't just some random stat Dr. Phil's pulled out of thin air. He's done his homework, and he's not afraid to call it like he sees it. This fear is tearing our society apart, he says, his voice filled with frustration. How can we solve anything if we're too scared to talk? We're turning into a nation of mutes, and it's all because of this cancel culture nonsense.
You are a transgender woman, that your brain is much more aligned functionally.
I was gonna be with somebody who accepted me for who I am.
Okay, well, I know you're young, but you fell for that. Come to Vegas, I'm gonna make you famous.
You can see the crowd starting to get riled up. Some are nodding along, others are shifting uncomfortably in their seats. But Dr. Phil's not done. He goes after the cancel culture mob, calling them out for shutting down honest conversations. These people think they're being virtuous, he says, but all they're doing is creating a culture of fear. And let me tell you, fear is the enemy of progress. Now, you gotta hand it to Dr. Phil. He's not just all talk, he's putting his own career on the line by speaking out like this. That takes guts. He looks straight into the camera and says, I know I might catch flack for this, but someone's gotta say it. We can't keep living like this. Then he turns to his audience and throws down the gauntlet. So what's it gonna be, folks? Are we gonna let fear run our lives, or are we gonna speak up? The energy in the room shifts. You can feel it. People are getting fired up. Dr. Phil's struck a nerve and he knows it. But here's the kicker. Dr. Phil's not done. Not by a long shot. He's got his sights set on an even bigger target, Hollywood. And let me tell you, he's not pulling any punches. The gloves are coming off and Tinseltown better watch out. Hollywood thinks it's the moral compass of America, but Dr. Phil's about to flip that script. Ever wonder why your favorite movies feel more like lectures these days? Well, buckle up, because Dr. Phil's taking aim at Tinseltown's woke obsession, and he's not pulling any punches.
For you, but it's not like, wow, that's radical, which means it's very likely.
These days, if you tell a parent if their child thinks that they might be transgender or has gender dysphoria, to wait and really consider it and maybe seek other therapy.
Dr. Phil's got a bone to pick with how Hollywood's handling cultural issues. He's going toe-to-toe with some professor who's all about defending cultural appropriation. You know, that thing where suddenly you can't wear or eat anything from another culture without someone crying foul. But Dr. Phil's not buying what they're selling. He's saying all this PC stuff is just making things worse. It's turning innocent stuff into full-blown battles. Like, since when did enjoying a burrito become a political statement? Dr. Phil's dropping truth bombs left and right, telling it like it is. He says most of the time people aren't mocking other cultures, they're just enjoying them. Eating sushi doesn't make you anti-Japanese, you know? The crowd split down the middle. Some folks are cheering like Dr. Phil just scored a touchdown, others look like they've seen a ghost. But Dr. Phil, cool as a cucumber. He's not here to make friends, he's here to speak his mind. And he's saying we should be celebrating cultural exchanges, not turning them into weapons. Imitation can be a form of flattery, he says. And you know what? He's got a point. When did we start getting so touchy about everything? But Dr. Phil's just warming up. He's got his sights set on big companies next. You know, the ones that slap a rainbow on their logo for a month and call it a day. Dr. Phil's calling BS on all of it. He's saying if these companies really cared about making a difference, they'd focus on real change, not just trying to look woke for PR purposes.
You're gonna be proven to be the liar today,
Well,
not me.
not unless you stop talking.
I'm just angry, Dr. Phil.
Well, actually,
show and have a doctor
differences
try to
within the
convince my
body
son that he's
for
a woman,
someone
I
that
would've
feels the
never
way
came.
you do. It's not just in your mind.
But regardless,
He's hitting them where it hurts, pointing out the hypocrisy. These companies talk a big game about diversity and inclusion, but when you look behind the curtain, it's all smoke and mirrors. Dr. Phil's not afraid to say what we're all thinking. It's just a show to boost their bottom line. Speaking of boosting bottom lines, Dr. Phil's not done exposing the lies. He's about to reveal how the fear of speaking up is costing us more than just our voices. What if I told you over half of Americans are scared to share their real thoughts? Dr. Phil's dropping truth bombs left and right, and let me tell you, the fallout is intense. He's not just ranting for the sake of it. Nah, he's trying to spark some real conversations, but man, the backlash, it's coming in hot. Social media platforms are going nuts. They're trying to censor clips from his show faster than you can say cancel culture. No more. Critics are calling him all sorts of names, saying he's out of touch and problematic. But Dr. Phil, he's not backing down. If anything, he's doubling down. He's calling out the hypocrisy big time.
It's like out of the goodness of your heart to try and make sure that they're making the right decision. Anything that goes against their narrative is just immediately labeled as transphobic.
need validation from you or
Right.
anybody else. You can't name one time I've ever asked you to call me a woman.
You can't, because you know I'm not.
But I didn't ask you to.
Okay, don't.
You know why?
So free speech is great, but only if you're saying the right thing. Come on, people. Dr. Phil's not having any of it. He's pointing out how these big tech companies are quick to silence anyone who doesn't toe the woke line. It's all about control, he says. But here's the kicker. Dr. Phil asks the question we're all thinking. How can we have real conversations if we're all scared of getting shut down? It's like we're living in some twisted version of 1984, where saying the wrong thing can get you erased from the internet. Then comes the mic drop moment. Dr. Phil looks straight into the camera and says, "If facts make you this upset, maybe reality isn't your strong suit." The audience goes wild. It's like he just said what everyone's been thinking but was too scared to say out loud. You can feel the energy shift in the room. People are fired up, ready to take on these big issues. It's like Dr. Phil's lit a fire under them. They're nodding, cheering, some even standing up. It's electric. But here's where it gets tricky. Is Dr. Phil right? Or is he just refusing to adapt to a changing world? Some say he's speaking truth to power. Others say he's just an old guy yelling at clouds. It's not an easy question to answer.